This is Infants on Thrones, the philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the Quorum.
Thank you, everyone, for making the change to come to this room for session, 176, Deciphering the Prophet James Strang's Vorhee plates, presented by John Hamer. A couple of things before we begin. John is a map maker, a historian, a blogger, and podcaster who researches and writes about the broader Latter-day Saint movement. John is past president of the John Whitmer Historical Association, which is the Community of Christ kind of joint version of Mormon History Association. John has produced maps for multiple publications.
Map maker, make me a map. Draw inside the lines, don't scribble like crap. You draw these better than any old sap, so make me a perfect map.
Maps for multiple publications. LDS Church Historians Press, Herald Publishing House, the Journal of Mormon History, Mormon Historic Studies, John Whitmer, and Restoration Studies. He's a co-author of In Pursuit of Peace, which I saw down in Benchmark Books earlier today, Community of Christ Journey, and Community of Christ and Illustrated History, which you can pick up complimentary at the Community of Christ booth. He served as co-editor of Scattering of the Saints, Schism Within Mormonism. John's ancestors joined the early church 7 generations ago in 1833. His own family history is intertwined with many expressions of the Restoration: Brighamites, Josephites, Rigdonites, Whitmerites, and Strangites. So you might need to find some more.
Like
sure.
Ite.
Yeah, he's an Ite. And John has done extensive research in the history of these groups. He lives in Toronto, where he's pastor of the downtown Toronto Community of Christ. So, John?
There we go. Thank you so much.
I'm going to come down here so I can see.
Okay, good.
Okay?
This is an unusual presentation for me because it's actually written, which is not what I normally do, but I'm preparing this for publication, and so we're a little further along, but I will try to not make it be boring by simply reading it, but there's also a lot of visuals. So the success of James Strang in the leadership struggle that followed the assassinations of Joseph and Hiram Smith is often viewed as a surprising anomaly. The other rivals who emerged during the succession crisis had institutional, historical, and or familial claims to forward. We just have our little group of alternatives. As the last surviving member of the church's first presidency, Sidney Rigdon had, in my opinion, the best claim by both civil and canon law. William Marks and Brigham Young, as presidents of the church's next 2 leading councils, the standing or presiding high council at church headquarters and the traveling high council of apostles, could forward institutional claims. Although out of the church, David Whitmer could point to an early ordination by Smith to succeed to the presidency in the event of the latter's death. At the death of Samuel H. Smith, William Smith, as the last adult male in the Smith family, aggressively promoted the idea of lineal or familial succession. And then Lyman White and Alphaeus Cutler held core leadership roles in the movement, including senior positions in the recently organized Kingdom of God on Earth, or the Council of 50. The standout exception in this constellation of would-be successors is James Strang, whom historians point out was a relatively recent convert to the church, without any august ordinations or close connections to the leadership of the movement. And yet, with the rapid collapse of Sidney Rigdon's organization, remarkably, it was Strang who quickly emerged as Brigham Young's most successful rival. A host of Mormon luminaries were attracted to Strang's banner, and whole branches of members were defecting one after another, switching their loyalty from Young's headquarters in Nauvoo to Strang's in Vorhee, Wisconsin. Richard Bennett observed that by 1845, Strang was, quote, a strong contender and a very real threat to Young's efforts to move the church members west. Stephen Shields has suggested that at its height in total, Strang's organization, counting all the people across the branches in the Midwest and East, Strang's organization might have been able to claim more adherents than Young's organization. I don't know if I agree with him, but anyway, that's Steve Shields' calculation. Robin Jensen has explained Strang's success by suggesting that those attracted to Strang were, quote, Mormons seeking Mormonism, specifically that vibrant kind of Mormonism that they had known under Smith, marked by heavenly signs and prophetic revelation. Young and the 12 offered strength and stability and the promise of a place of refuge from persecution. But while Young acted as president of the church, he rarely laid overt claim to Smith's prophetic gifts. Strang, by contrast, announced a host of prophetic evidences from personal angelic ordination to the discovery of ancient records on metal plates, complete with a new set of witnesses and an inspired translation of new scripture. These signs seem to be cut whole cloth from Smith's prophetic mantle, and while they were dismissed by many early Latter-day Saints, a large proportion found them impressive. In this article, I will examine the facsimile and translation of the earliest set of Strang's plates. We'll go to this one here. Oh, Strang is this guy who's got the best portrait too, right? Look into my eyes and tell me I'm not a prophet, right? He's great. Okay, and then, the facsimile, this is the published facsimile of Strang's plates, and there's 3 metal plates. These are 2 sides, and you can see here with the dotted lines here it's showing the front and back of each one of these. So those are published in the Strangite newspaper and pamphlets. Where was I? Okay. And I'm going to look at these plates, commonly known as the Vorhee plates, and demonstrate, though, how this work is actually even more impressive than early Strangites ever knew. The Vorhee plates are so called because of their association with Vorhee, the initial gathering place for the Strangite saints, just outside of Burlington, Wisconsin, which is actually, once again, now the headquarters of the Strangite Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Strangite, but anyway, the Strang is the same name, and their surviving congregation is back there in Vorhee, and they've continued to exist. It's a small group, but this congregation, I think, is eminently sustainable. So they've been small ever since. So there's nothing. I don't put them on unlike the Cutlerites, who are really on life support. There's like 6 Cutlerites, and there's about 20 anthropologists camped around them trying to get their secrets. The Strangites, are completely sustainable, I think. The Vorhee plates are not to be confused with the brass plates or the plates of Laban that are mentioned in the Book of Mormon, which Strang was later said to have used to translate the Book of the Law of the Lord. That's a completely separate issue. It's also very, 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 very interesting, but not what we're talking about today. According to the testimony of the 4 official witnesses of the Vorhee plates, the plates were discovered buried beneath an oak tree on a small hill known today as the Hill of Promise at Vorhee on September 13th, 1845. There were 3 small metal plates total, with writing on 4 of the 6 pages and illustrations on the remaining 2. Work on the translation progressed quickly, and Strang was able to present a translation 5 days after the discovery of the plates. The comparison of Strang's Vorhee plates and Joseph Smith's golden plates is both obvious and inevitable. Both sets of metal plates were said to be buried at hills, at the locations of which were revealed by angelic messengers. However, with the golden plates, their burial is known solely from Smith's testimony. When Smith received the golden plates, the only person who accompanied him was his wife Emma, who waited nearby in a carriage and did not witness him unearthing them. In Strang's case, the location of the plates was likewise said to have been identified by angelic vision, but the actual excavation and discovery of the plates was effected by the 4 official Vorhee witnesses. According to their published testimony, quote, Strang took no part in the digging, but kept entirely away from before the first blow was struck till after the plates were taken out of the case. So that's their description, quote unquote. From the numerous accounts of the many witnesses to both sets of plates over and above the official testimony statements, the 2 sets of plates had different characteristics. The Vorhee plates were much smaller, lighter, and fewer in number than the golden plates. More importantly, recorded observations of the 2 physical artifacts differ in a very significant way. The idea that none of the witnesses of the Book of Mormon ever recanted their testimony of the plates, despite the fact that all of them who were outside of the Smith family eventually broke with Smith before his death, has long been a bedrock of Latter-day Saint apologetics. Building on that claim, anti-Strangite Latter-day Saint apologetics, in other words, apologetics from all the other Latter-day Saint traditions who aren't Strangites, so pretty much everybody yelling at the Strangites, has tended to focus on the Vorhee witnesses who likewise broke with Strang before his death and the degree to which they did or didn't recant their testimony. With the golden plates, only a relatively small number of people had contact with the artifact, although the total is many more than the official 11 witnesses. However, in kind of an exhaustive study of this, Dan Vogel has shown that the accounts of contact with the golden plates, the artifact was always kind of said to have a very spiritual component. Specifically, although enough people recorded contact with the golden plates to confirm that a physical artifact existed, their accounts likewise indicate that their contact was limited to lifting the artifact covered in a cloth or sealed in a wooden box, or sometimes maybe they're saying that they felt under the cloth and felt it. Aside from Joseph Smith, no one was permitted to see the golden plates artifact directly. All the visual accounts are visionary, and not everybody agrees with this, but I'm following Dan Vogel on this, and you can read his paper. As William Smith recalled, quote, "I was permitted to lift them as they laid in a pillowcase, but not to see them, as it was contrary to the commands Joseph had received." Unquote. The other accounts of unofficial witnesses include Joseph's mother, Lucy, his wife, Emma, her father, Isaac Hale, who recalled, quote, "I was shown a box. I was allowed to feel the weight of the box. They gave me to understand that the Book of Plates was then in the box, into which, however, I was not allowed to look." So this is the encounter with the Book of the Golden Plates artifact. So among the official witnesses to the Book of Mormon, the experience of the three witnesses was visionary, with experience with spiritual eyes, as Martin Harris recounted. And despite the implication of the statement which Smith wrote that the 8 witnesses signed, their contact with the plates artifact was consistent with the other accounts. They, quote, "saw and hefted the plates." They don't say so, but i.e., in other words, wrapped in the box or in the cloth. And they affirmed that they, quote, "saw the engravings thereon, all of which had the appearance of ancient work and of curious workmanship." This should be read to mean that they saw the engravings thereon, which are written here on the transcript. They didn't see them directly on the plates. In short, with the golden plates, Smith was in possession of an artifact that could be handled, felt, and lifted, but which he said he was commanded not to display with the naked eye. They have a spiritual component and can be seen with the spiritual eye. They're too holy. Numerous accounts of the interactions with the Vorhee plates, however, indicate no such prohibition on visual inspection. Strang showed the plates to all comers, member and non-member alike. Christopher Latham Scholes, the editor of the Southport Telegraph in what was Southport then, now Kenosha, Wisconsin, visited Vorhee and examined the plates. Scholes, who went on to invent the QWERTY typewriter, reported on his examination of the plates in an article for his paper published on September 30th, 1845. He says, quote, "The Vorhee plates, the wonder of many, I saw them, and the place from whence they were taken. They're about an inch and a half by 2 3/4, thickly covered with ancient characters of curious workmanship." Other accounts, both friendly and hostile, agree the Vorhee plates existed as a small physical artifact that was frequently held and visually inspected. Although eventually lost, the artifact continued to be in the possession of one of Strang's widows, Betsy McNutt, for many years after Strang's assassination. With the broader context of all the accounts of physical contact with the two sets of plates, we can therefore establish that both included a physical artifact, but while the observers were free to visually inspect the Vorhee plates, inspection of the golden plates artifact was always restricted to touching and lifting while covered. Copies of the inscriptions from both plates were produced and have survived. In the case of the golden plates, a transcript of a number of Book of Mormon characters survived in the possession of David Whitmer, is currently in the archives of Community of Christ in Independence. and it's gone in the vault and seen it. That's a really neat thing. Sometimes called the Anthon transcript. It's not necessarily, but it's just because of the story. It may or may not be the set of Book of Mormon characters that Martin Harris took to Professor Charles Anthon for authentication. Anthon's own recollection of the characters that he was shown differs from the description that we see in this, and so that's one of the reasons why Mark Hoffman made a forgery to try to make one that fitted better, and he was able to kind of get people to think that that was the true Anthon transcript, although that one obviously is less true than this one. So, it's cool looking, though. That was really neat, too. I mean, he's an artistic guy. Okay, so be that as it may, the surviving characters transcript is generally accepted to date from the Book of Mormon translation period and is believed to be either a direct copy by Joseph Smith or the writing engraved or a copy of his copy. This is actually probably a copy of one that he maybe had. This characters is... I think it's written in one of the hands of the Whitmer brothers, like Jacob Whitmer's hand is what Aaron Metcalf has determined. Christian Whitmer, yeah. So it's also clear that with the characters transcript, we have only a brief selection of the golden plates text. A complete facsimile of all the plates would be much, much longer. The characters transcript gives us no indication as to which portion of the Book of Mormon text is being excerpted. And although we have several decipherments have been attempted, almost always with aid of revelation, there's lots and lots of published ones that you can go and find. None have found general acceptance after independent scholarly scrutiny. So in my view, actually, there's very little reason to imagine that a decipherable writing system underlies the Golden Plate's characters. Actual writing systems can be categorized into several varieties. So we'll look at what some of these are. The most familiar with us are alphabets, which use individual characters to represent phonemes, vowel, consonant sounds in the spoken language. Different alphabets do a better or worse job of representing all the sounds in a given language. For example, we're very familiar with the Roman alphabet, which does a great job of being able to spell out Latin words, but it's not as good for English, as we know from how fun spelling is for English. So, for example, there's no letter here for either our the sound or our th sound, which we confusingly use the letters T and H for the exact, for both sounds. A second type of writing system is called abjads. They provide only the consonants, and so you may be familiar with these. The idea that, for example, Hebrew, which is written with the Aramaic alphabet, it doesn't actually have any of the vowels unless you write the little dots in that they started doing in the Middle Ages. And likewise, Arabic, which derives from the same Aramaic background, are also abjads without the vowels, in other words. Another type, this is lots of fun. I love this when I went to visit the Cherokees when I was a little kid, and I got the chart of this, the Cherokee syllabary. So this is a system in which whole syllables, either a cluster that is sort of like consonant-vowel or consonant-vowel-consonant, each one of those essentially has a character. And so as a result of that, like this one that's created for the Cherokees by Sequoia, because of the number of combinations of sound clusters, syllabaries require many more characters than alphabets or abjads. And so all these, just knowing these different kinds of writing systems is very helpful when you're trying to attempt a decipherment. You have to kind of say, well, how many characters are there? Well, there's not enough here to make a syllabary, and there's maybe too many for an abjad. You start to decide what you're dealing with when it's an unknown language or alphabet or writing system. The last major category of the system, logographic, where each word has its own character. Obviously, the logographic writing system requires far and away the most individual characters, which is why languages written in wordgrams like Chinese can require tens of thousands of characters. Since logograms represent one word, the same character can be used to write in two different languages, two different words that have the same basic meaning, but they sound totally different because they're in a different language. So, for example, if we have this kind of a character, then in Chinese, it means body, but in Chinese it would have a completely different sound. I'm not going to attempt Chinese. I don't know Chinese or Japanese, but I guess, anyway, T, karada, something like that. In other words, you would have the same writing, and the Chinese person would read it completely differently from a Japanese reader. We know today that ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics are a mixed writing system between logograms and alphabetic elements. However, because their decipherment by Champollion in the 1820s, continuing before that decipherment, and continuing afterwards until his findings were widely disseminated, European scholars attributed remarkable properties to the hieroglyphics, which even means magic writing. So, for example, mid-17th century writing, so before Champollion, Athanasius Kircher published 4 volumes of so-called translations of hieroglyphs, where he claimed that the individual characters represented whole sentences or ideas. For example, his translation of just one character was, "The treachery of Typhon ends at the throne of Isis. The moisture of nature is guarded by the vigilance of Anubis." So that's just one of the characters in the hieroglyphics, according to Kircher. But we know, actually, now that it's been deciphered, that actually represents the more mundane Thwasser, which means Osiris said. So it doesn't say all the things that Kircher attributed to it, right? So hints in the Book of Mormon text indicate that Joseph Smith shared Kircher's pre-Champollion view of Egyptian, which would only be natural, since that's what everybody thought it was like. So, for example, Nephi's explanation that they engraved using Reformed Egyptian rather than Hebrew because of the space constraints makes no sense whatsoever when actual Egyptian is compared with Hebrew. The latter is written in a vowelless abjad, is among the most economical writing systems. If you're going to write anything and engrave it onto plates, Hebrew is really great for that. And hieroglyphics, by contrast, are crazy bulky. Even the later streamlined forms, hieratic and demotic. In the pre-Champollion conception, however, whole verses would have been contained with a single character, theoretically allowing the Book of Mormon, 588 pages long in the first print edition, to be engraved on a much, much, much smaller number of plates. When Smith encountered the actual Egyptian manuscripts in Kirtland, do I have one of these? Yeah, so in Kirtland, this is from the Joseph Smith Egyptian Grammar and Language, which I think I probably just pulled from your website. When he encountered those papyruses, he confirmed that he held this pre-Champollion view of Egyptian writing in constructing this, because he derives entire verses and paragraphs from single Egyptian symbol. So therefore, there's every reason to believe that the characters on the characters transcript are not meant to be alphabetic, syllabic, or logographic, but instead intended as some kind of mytho-ideogram. So in other words, this idea that it's something more than that. This is a magic thing that can have a whole verses in one character. The characters on the Vorhee plates are completely different. Getting back to these? Yeah. On the Vorhee plates are completely different from the golden plates characters. The total number of distinct characters is about between 13 to 16, depending on if you're deciding if that one is a little different from that one or something like that. This is far too few to be logographic writing or a syllabary. The small number of characters is either of an alphabet that is somewhat poor in sounds or an abjad like Hebrew. So unlike the characters transcript, which may or may not even cover an excerpt from the Book of Mormon that is undetermined, with the Vorhee plates facsimile, we have the complete text of the plates. And with Strang's translation, we have the complete translation of the text. There's no sealed portion, and it will be apparent below. So the text on the facsimile is separated by punctuation, which is nice to have too. So a single dot, I would argue, or it seems to, means it indicates a word break, while 2, 3, or 4 dots seem to indicate sentence or paragraph breaks. Dividing the characters in this way yields a word count of 160 words. That is very close to the size of Strang's published translation, which has 202 words, 209 including the title. In deciphering an unknown alphabet or code, having a translation of the contents is perhaps the next best thing to having an actual key. A key is generally found in the form of a bilingual inscription. For example, the very famous Rosetta Stone that allowed Champollion to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs has the same text written in Egyptian, both in hieroglyphic and in demotic, which is then translated and inscribed in ancient Greek. In addition to unknown characters, the Vorhee plates do contain one word that is written. Is it there or here? Yeah, it's one word that's written It's here. One is written in a known alphabet. There's a cartouche, and if you remember from the decipherment of Egyptian, that the cartouches was a big deal because the cartouches would be the pharaoh's name or something like that. But anyway, there's a cartouche here. That was circled in the original, and that it has Hebrew characters, and the Hebrew characters spell TS. This is I don't know Hebrew, but anyway, this is the Kevin Barney helped me. He knows Hebrew. So anyway, so it's essentially the character that is the sound TS, L, M, W, and T. And so Kevin Barney identified this as the Hebrew word Salmaweth, which is a combination of sel, which means shadow, and mawith, which means death. And this word appears in the Old Testament 18 times, including famously in the 23rd Psalm, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So it's that phrase right there, shadow of death. The phrase death shade, then, in English, appears twice in Strang's translation of the Vorhee plates. The first line of the second paragraph reads, I have in the burial served them, and their bones in the death shade towards the sun's rising are covered. So in other words, there's the word death shade in the English. And the second line of the third paragraph reads, the word of God came to me while I mourned in the death shade, saying, I will avenge me on the destroyer. So we have the Hebrew and we have two translations where it says death shade. So it's reasonable to suppose that the place where the cartouche appears on the plates begins one or other of the instances in Strang's translation. And since Strang uses the phrase twice while the cartouche only appears once, it's possible that the cartouche is a Rosetta Stone-like bilingual inscription and translating this Hebrew word into the unknown script either before it or after it, right? So that's possible. That's a surmise. As it turns out, the word on the right of the cartouche appears only once in the text, while this one appears twice in the facsimile. So all of the characters have meant that there's a very good potential. All these characteristics have meant there's a very good potential to affect a complete decipherment of the Vorhee plates. The most crucial breakthrough was apparently made by a guy named Keith Thompson, who published his findings on a website about 20 years ago that has subsequently been deactivated, and I haven't been able to find it. Anyway, but in deciphering an unknown script, the question is always open as to whether it should be read left to right, like English and Latin, or right to left, like Hebrew and Arabic, or even in columns, up and down, or theoretically down to up. I don't know that anybody actually does that, but anyway, sometimes with the Vorhee plates, we are clearly dealing with rows rather than columns. There's no lines here for columns. And Thompson determined that the characters are actually written both left to right and right to left. So should the text be written read left to right, or should it be read right to left, right? It's hard to do that. So boustrophodon is the answer. Both. Which is very interesting. Specifically, the Vorhee plates are inscribed in a style known as boustrophodon. The scribe in this case begins writing, as it turns out, the text of the Vorhee plates is written both, what is that? It's hard to read this way. Boustrophodon, yeah, which means that each line alternates direction. It's very hard to read the other way, right? Anyway, that's how it's going. It's really interesting that this happens.
Ancient Greek and Hebrew and Phoenician all started out like that.
That's right. Yeah. So the scribe in this case does that. So although this is rare, this style of writing is known from a number of forms of ancient inscriptions, especially the earliest of these inscriptions. So with this breakthrough, lining up of the clusters of characters separated word by dots with the Strang's translation is a relatively easy and clear task. And for the correspondence to be valid then, multiple instances of the same word in Strang's translation should recur the same number of times in the facsimile. So I'll just kind of show you how this works. So if I take here what I'm calling plate 1B, the backside of it, and then I just took each one of these guys here and separated them out. So it goes, so reading it this, and this is like I'm just making my own little thing of what these are. So this character here, so this was being read that way, but since it freaks me out to do that, I changed it. So this is corresponding that way, right, to those characters. And then it's read this way, so like those guys, are going like that, and then this way, and this way, like that, right? For all of these. And so then you can divide it out, and I made a little shorthand, right, of what I think the character kind of looks like, those things. So, for example, let's see. Anyway, so I did it for all of these. Okay. So then if we try to line this up, let's see. So if we try to line it up, let's see if I'm getting that, might be ahead of myself. I don't have it written down here. For example, including the title, as we'll see below, Strang uses the definite article the 17 times. He uses the indefinite article and twice, and this is in the English translation. The word and appears 9 times, are and in 7 times, I 5 times, of, there 4 times each, dwell, my, on, there, they is 3 times each, bones, but, death, shade, fallen, God, have, it, me, not, people, record, thy, to, and word are each in there twice. So it's pretty good. There's a lot of different making in the English. There's a lot of the words that double and triple up. So remarkably, all 58 of these multiple instances of translation line up precisely where they're expected in the facsimile. So all of the 9 ands separate the phrases clearly. Each are clearly multiple repetitions of the word I, are, of, there, dwell, my, there, and they. Omitted are articles, a and the, so that those don't have a place. And certain helping words in English, like shall, in the phrase shall dwell, and hath, in the phrase hath reveal, occur as particles of a single word in the unknown Vorhee language. So the number of expected oddities are very few. In appears 7 times in Strang's text, but in the unknown text there must be 2 separate words for in. One appears 3 times, the other appears twice. The remaining 2 have to be read as helping words that are part of the noun, i.e. in battle or in the hill of promise, and so those are comparted into the particle. In addition, rather than repeating as expected, there are 2 separate words for the instances each of it, on, and he. In one instance, a short word in the middle of the phrase, the mighty are fallen and the young slain in battle, appears to have been left untranslated. The oddities are few enough to be viewed as either particularities of the unknown language or the result of scribal error on the part of either the original scribe or on the part of the artist who created the facsimile. So although Thompson apparently considered his proposal to be very tentative, I think the overwhelming number of these correspondences are essentially concluded. When they're lined up, the next question is whether we can identify this known language. And so, anyway, if I can just go through here as we're reading it, there's this first part that's that I'm leaving off. Then the beginning of Strang's translation, this is on this first plate, is my people are no more, the mighty are actually the Bistrophion really screws me up. My people are no more, the mighty are fallen, and the young the is part of the word here. There's no separate article. Are slain in battle. So again, there's no separate word here for in. Their bones are bleached on the, and this is actually maybe a plural on the plain, so this is the rest of the word plain, by the noonday, where am I at? By the noonday shadow, the houses are leveled to dust, and in the moat are the walls, they shall be inhabited. I have in the burial served them, and their bones in the death shade, Salaweth, shadow of death in Hebrew, toward the sun's rising. And there's another little logogram here that maybe looks like a sun that I'm saying is probably the sun's rising. Are the sun's rising. Covered they sleep with the mighty dead, and they rest with their fathers. They have fallen in transgression and are not. But the elect and faithful shall there dwell. The word hath revealed it. God hath sworn to give an inheritance to his people where the transgressors failed. The word of God came to me while I, and this is the author of the plates, right? Came to me while I in the death shade mourned. I will avenge, saying, he, the destroyer. I'm back. I got started going backwards again. Mourned the death shade in, saying, I will avenge me on the destroyer. He shall be driven out. Other strangers shall inhabit this place. Do we have the Hill of Promise in Vorhee? Other strangers shall inhabit thy land. I, an ensign there, will set up. The escaped of my people there shall dwell. When the flock disown the shepherd and build not upon the rock, the forerunner, some forerunner, whoever that might be, men shall kill. But a mighty prophet there shall dwell. I shall be his strength, and he shall bring forth thy record.
His name will be James.
What? Yeah, who's it going to be? Who's going to be? Who was the forerunner? Right. So where the people are going to dwell and have a place. My words, and bury it in the hill of promise. And that's it. So anyways, that's how the text goes. And so then all the way through here, those are all of the different characters that are and. These are the different ways that, like I said, read the one way or the other, are all the different R's. Theirs and theirs, record, death shade, depending on which way it's read. God, word, words, so a plural that is not being pluralized here with a S, but is instead, or with just an added addition, but is in somehow a different, the same like ox and oxen or whatever, something's happening, or burial, bury, so the words are related, but something else is going on. Record and a noun, record. So you can see the related roots here, but it's a different word. Transgression, transgressors, related words, but again different from each other. Flock is related to shepherd here. Some of the letters anyway. They, there are different. God is related to the word. This is reversed again here. Prophet, mighty prophet. So the prophet is related to God in this language. And so this is again where now we have the word are, but then we have helping word particles. So instead of, in the English translation is will set, shall inhabit, shall dwell. Instead we have the particle are that gets attached into the actual word, right? So it's actually the helping verb is part of the verb somehow in this language. Shall be driven, shall. And then we have logograms. So we have a plus sign that means and, which is a little bit crazy. And then we have the sun's rising, right?
So that's not a cross on the top of the hill, it's the letter and.
It could be, yeah. I think it's a cross.
I'm joking.
Sometimes a cross is just a cross. Let's see. Okay. So the unknown language likewise doesn't appear to be Hebrew, because our Rosetta Stone phrase death shade requires 5 characters in Hebrew, but only 4 characters in the unknown language. The words do not fit Latin or Greek. For example, the plates have. I don't know if I read. Maybe I read it out. I didn't. Anyway, the characters that don't work won't line up. If we're trying to make this be Latin or Greek. So the first and third characters of the word are the same, which would not be working for Latin deus or Greek theos. The unknown language, therefore, does not appear to be one of the more common languages known and available to people in Strang's day. So it's not English and it's not Latin, Greek, or Hebrew. So using the word list we have generated, though, we can identify a number of the unknown language's characteristics. For example, if we take the list of plural nouns, they don't find any one character predominates at the end of the words the way S does in English, commonly forming plural nouns in English. In the one instance where we have both the singular plural of the same words, I mentioned the word we can see that the plural is formed by an internal change within the word. So just as in the English woman and women, something like that is happening as opposed to a plural like an S. We can see with words transgressions related to transgressors, so I already went through those. So finally, we should note that in addition to the alphabetic characters, we have those logograms. And so given that what we are dealing with here is a language that is not English, which may not be any known language, the final phase of the decipherment would be to attempt to determine the sound values now of each of the characters. And this would only be possible if our Rosetta Stone phrases actually includes a loan word from the Hebrew in the unknown language, or if Strang's translation included a proper name, so that we could actually see what some of them are to try to line it up. Unfortunately, as we've seen, the main word that gets translated, Salmaweth in Hebrew, is only 4 characters long in the unknown language, and as such is unlikely to be a Hebrew loan word. Whereas Strang's translation, there are no proper nouns, unlike Hil Kamora, which is a proper Nephite name. Strang has translated the name of the hill in Vorhee as Hill of Promise, so we don't know what the Vorite would be called. Fortunately, as Thompson observed, and maybe you saw when I did it and I started in my transcription, there's like these 2 lines that occur before the beginning of the translation. And so the first, let's see if I have this, was we were going back to so here, these 2 lines that are before my people are no more. The first of these, this thing here, we know elsewhere from the text means the record. So that's a doubled letter. And the next line has the known word of, followed by 2 unknown words, followed by of again, and then followed by a final unknown word. So this caused Thompson to speculate, I think again posited correctly, that this is the record of Raja Manchu of Vorhee, which is how Strang called the title of the work. So in this case then, even though he didn't say this was part of the translation, the title then would exist actually in the translation. So if that's correct, then we do actually have proper nouns. Yay! Raja Manchu of Vorhee, which would possibly yield as many as 3 vowels and 6 consonants, depending on if it's an abjad. So how do we make it? But as we might expect, the problem with that is, okay, so if this is Raja, that could work because of the ahs there, right? And likewise, Vorhee, it would be this one. And so we have, where's Vorhee? Anyway, it's possible there, right? But the problem with it is then Raja Manchu of Vorhee, then should it be Vorto or Voreo? Anyway, so it's not entirely clear. The problem with it is that when we do these things, Raja Manchu of Vorhee, some of those letters should be paralleling up, and they don't properly do it. And so the problem that we might be facing here is that this is the least decipherable part of the text, and it may be where the facsimile is flawed. But as a result of it, that maybe being a flaw in the text, we also then can't actually pull out of it what the individual letters mean. So in other words, I tried to puzzle through it, and I can't get any more than that out of it. And so we're going to publish, and then somebody who's more mathematically minded will maybe be able to run the numbers and do a crypto quip and really get this thing to work in terms of what the actual sounds are. But for me, I wasn't able to get it through that last roadblock. So in my original paper, I intended to do a study of ciphers and codes, also by Strang and his followers. So Strang and his followers also wrote in a whole bunch of other ciphers and codes, secret letters to each other. But I determined really that to be way too long. You guys have already sat through all of our time, probably. I don't know how much time I have left.
15 minutes.
Oh, we're doing great. We could have done ciphers. Strang used a code, for example, to record the most private thoughts in his diary. After organizing the Strangite church, Strang and his followers used other codes to send each other private instructions and to prevent secrets from falling into the hands of persecutors should the letters be intercepted. Some followers continued to use codes long after Strang's martyrdom. In all these cases, the codes are ciphers that mask English messages. That is, they are a way to write English without using the Roman alphabet, and not in any apparent way are they related to the unknown script and language of the Vorhee plates. So I've gone through the keys, and there's nothing in particular that steps out at me. They're using different characters and things like that. So, to conclude, many Mormons who were seeking the prophetic leadership that they had experienced before Joseph Smith's death came to Vorhee and inspected the Vorhee plates. A large number were impressed with what they saw, joined with Strang, and built up the Strangite Mormon movement. However, none of them were trained epigraphers, and none of them had attempted a close study or decipherment of the plates. With all of that, early Strangites found the plates impressive, but having conducted such a study, I believe that the plates are even more impressive than they ever knew. So I have like 15 minutes for questions. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, first.
The illustrations, aside from the words, is there any sort of meaning that you can pull?
Yes. So these are also, the illustrations also have descriptions that Strang published. And so this is a landscape, so it's actually sideways. So in that way, maybe these are rows or columns if you want to have it read it that way. But essentially, this is the Hill of Promise, and this is the plain, and this is the river that right by Vorhee, and this is the river where they did baptisms for the dead and things like that. They're the Strangites, and that's where the Strangite church is today, and the Strangite farms and things like that. This one over here is, I think that this is the author, the prophet that was, or the general that was leading the battle. My people are no more, where he's talking about this. And then these other symbols are especially there's like 12 stars, and there's a sun and a moon, and it's representing all of the. I don't have the thing written out, but anyway, it's essentially representing all of these kind of Mormon metaphors of priesthood authority and this kind of a thing, where the stars and sun and moon all represent those kind of things. You were.
How large did you say? I mean,
these were just a couple inches big. They're like
just real tiny.
Yeah, they're really tiny. So these are very, very tiny. Yeah, Heather.
So I noticed the homophones there, T-H-E-I-R and T-H-E-R-E, were also related in the language.
Yeah.
Similar. Are they etymologically related so that in English that would make sense, or is that just kind of a tell?
Yeah, it could be a tell. I mean, like I say, the ampersand as a logogram is a kind of a tell. So that might be. But yeah, so that would just be something that maybe we're familiar with. Christian, do you want to say?
So, two questions. The Raja Manchu.
Yes.
He said that was a name. That wasn't two kind of Eastern titles. That just general.
So yeah, sometimes a person like let's say, Melchizedek. We say that guy, that's his name, right? But Zedek means king, right? And so it's Melech, yeah. Yeah, that's what it is. And so, yeah. Okay, there it is, yeah. So those things, right? So there's those names where Abimelech and all of those kind of, and those Melech in there is what I meant to say, Abimelech.
Jesus is God, is Elohim.
Yeah, and so it's possible, I don't think he didn't tell it as a title, but it's possible that there's an awareness that for important people, these titles are part of their name or something like that, right?
Okay. And the second one was, where did the name come from? Vorhee? Like burrito is really like a Spanish diminutive.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange. It's a strange thing, but yeah. So it's so Vorhee is what Strang announced that the gathering place was going to be called prophetically, and then this is, and I think that's possibly before the plates, but in any event, it's definitely what the place is called. Ever after. Okay. So, yeah.
So what were they made of? What eventually became of them? Moroni take them back?
No, Moroni did not take them back. They were definitely able to be inspected for a long time thereafter. They're on metal, but it's not precious metal, and so I don't know if it probably some like tin of some kind or something like that. Have you heard? No. Okay, I thought you were going to answer that question. So what happened was then they went with the Strangites to Beaver Island. They were on Beaver Island. In Strang's house. They were among the possessions that Strang's widow, Betsy McNutt, took with her. She ultimately became a Whitmerite. She was living near the Josephite colony of Lamoni, Iowa, in the Whitmerite colony next door, Leon, I think, Iowa. And at some point or other, now this is now into folklore, she would always show them to people and things like that. At some point or other, the lore is, whether this is true or not, elders from the Brighamite tradition knocked on her door and asked if they could see them and borrow them for a while, and she parted with them, and then they never did appear again. So maybe they're in the vault. I don't know. But anyway, we don't know. We don't know what happened to them. Anyway, they were around for decades after Strang's death, and people continued to see them, but now they're gone.
They gave them back to Moroni for him.
Maybe they did. Yeah, they were just like, hey, Moroni needs these. Yes.
So, having not read Strang's translation of the text, what is the cross on the hill representative of, or?
I wish I had smartly brought. I should have brought the printouts of the of what he'd said exactly.
Right here.
Oh, you do? Oh, you have it. You got the book. Perfect. Okay, this is beautiful. Yeah. So, the figure of the man. This is just okay. So here we are from the thing. The eye, the symbol of God, who is all-seeing, consequently is called the all-seeing eye, and has been used as symbolical of the deity in all countries and all ages of the world. 2. The figure of the man, drawn down to the waist, having a crown resembling a cup, and composed of radiating lines on his head and a scepter on his hand. These are symbols of authority and show him a ruler, as he has the sun, the moon, and the stars, all natural lights below him, and only the all-seeing eye above him. That means he is a prophet, a seer, a revelator, a translator, and first president of the church, governing not by natural light or by mere human wisdom, but by revelation, or the word of God, and derives his authority solely from God, and not in any sense from the actions of men. 3rd, the sun and the moon on the right. The sun on the right and the moon on the left. They represent the 2 vice presidents or counselors in the first presidency. The 2 largest natural lights being used as symbols because they are to assist the first president in wisdom or natural light merely, and not by revelation. 4th, a cross or pillar above and resting upon the center of a large and under the human figure. 2 pillars above resting upon the 2 upper large stars, and below them the sun and the moon. These represent the coadjutors or assistants or helpers, all these guys here, right? Which is coadjutors or helpers. These represent or assistants or helpers, of whom there have been several since the beginning of the church, appointed by revelation. The 12 stars, 6 around the sun, 6 around the moon. These represent the high council, the presiding high council of the church. The division into 6 classes of 6 is because they agrees with the way they argue, right? The 6 are on each side in a case. This is not a high council of the stake. It's saying explicitly. It's the presiding high council. The 12 large stars, 10 of these in 2 rows at the bottom of the plate, and 2 over the sun and the moon. These represent the 12 apostles, which are therefore in this image very explicitly understood that the traveling 12 are lower than the presiding high council at the headquarters. Anyway, and that's what that is. So then beyond that, 70 stars, hey, that represents us. 70s. And they're subject to the direction of the 12, as we know. So, and then 8th line straight dropping from down the scepter. These are therefore, saith the Lord, behold, I lay in Zion the foundation of a stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. He that believeth shall not make haste. So I don't know if does it have the other one described. Do we have this one described?
I don't know if it does describe that one. I think this is the one.
It's possible. Oh, this is where it's buried.
Yeah.
This is where they're buried. X marks the spot of where the plates are buried. Thank you for bringing this. This is a great book. Yes.
So are these considered scripture or just one of the novelty for Strangites?
So Strangites are of a very different practice than all the other traditions. The Strangites have a very interesting kind of Mormonism that you realize after you've been to the Strangite church, you realize what it's like to have had 2 prophets, and you realize that the Brighamites have really only ever had 1 prophet, Joseph, because there is an equal amount of material that is the Strang material that is actually just amazingly integrated. Just like all this sounds like so really Mormon stuff, right? So it's amazingly integrated into like all of the Joseph Smith thought, but it's like completing it in so many ways, and there's all kinds of new things. What was the original part of the question? Because I went off on a tangent.
Or the scripture.
Oh, scripture. Anyway, so what ended up happening was, though, then both of their prophets got martyred, and they have not had a prophet since. It's impossible, according to the book of the law, for somebody as little authority as an apostle to ever take control of the church. That's against God's explicit commandment in the book of the law. Anybody who does that is a terrible apostate, and that's obviously, So anyway, so when Strang got martyred, that meant that none of his apostles, none of the Strangite apostles had the authority to lead the church, since the apostles don't have that authority. And so what ended up happening was you have to wait until there's some new prophet that's appointed directly by angels, or until the prophet, the dying prophet, appointed a successor, like Joseph Smith did by writing the letter that appointed James Strang successor. And since Strang didn't do that, they have not had a prophet ever since. So their practice is that anything written and published in the lifetime of the prophets is functionally law of the church. And so they have a much bigger corpus. It's not technically scripture, but they have a much bigger corpus of functional law than all the other churches, because they have the whole Messenger and Advocate, the Evening and Morning Star, the Times and Seasons, and then all the Vorhee newspapers, so the Vorhee Herald, the Zion's Reveille, the Northern Islander. So all of those things, anything that's published in the lifetime of the prophets under the imprint of the prophet, a teacher in the church, which is one of the most important priesthood callings. When you're a teacher in the church, and all the teachers in the church are women. So when the teachers in the church are going, and what they do, and they want to say, what should the church do? The teachers go to the published texts from the prophets, right out of the Times and Seasons or whatever it is, wherever it's coming from, and they can bring that in front of the church, and that can actually change the whole way the church goes. And so 3 important teachers in the 1960s argued that the church needed to regather to Vorhee because it was the only stake that hadn't been defiled, and where the order to gather from the prophets had been revoked. And so only Vorhee. And so the church all moved back there. And it was under that kind of interpretation from the teachers. So it's very different. The men are almost all high priests. So essentially it's like two priesthood that way. So anyway, so it's very different, though. So they actually also are really... they're very down on and against this whole thing about like reading stuff and getting a spiritual feeling about it, and that makes you think that you're doing the right thing or not. They're like, what are you talking about? No. What does it say in the law? So they're much more open about interpretation in the text than other groups. Who was next? It was Perry. Yeah.
Trey Parker says more than one occasion has folks funded the fact that the Book of Mormon was right behind in Joseph Smith's backyard.
Yeah.
So why Vorhee? Why did he end up?
Yeah, he lived. No, he lived there.
So it was in his backyard too.
Yeah. James Strang lived there.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, Josh.
So have there any efforts been made to bring Strangites to kind of like Sunstone?
They'll come. Yeah. So the historian Dave August is the historian of the church, and he's a great guy, a friend of mine. He's come to multiple Sunstones. He especially comes to MHAs. He'll always go to JWHA. Bill Shepard, who is the previous Strangite historian of the church for just years and years. He was president of the John Whitmer Historical Association. He has been on the board forever, and so the Strangites are very much interested in kind of like ecumenical Latter-day Saint interconnections. So, yes.
What's the apologetic? You mentioned the realization that Egyptian characters does not equate to a verse or a chapter or whatever. What's the apologetic response within the different strains of Mormonism that we know
how they do it?
It doesn't work that way. What's the apologetic response to that?
That was the scribes that are just writing stuff, and they didn't really. It wasn't Joseph Smith's direction. It's W.W. Phelps is just writing nonsense on the Egyptian papers and this kind of thing. We don't have the real papyrus. All this kind of on and on and on and on. Right.
So was this the symbol was a marker or something instead of an actual?
It's just W.W. Phelps speculating. It has nothing to do with the real translation, that kind of thing. So anyway, I'm not actually engaging in what we kind of call LDS apologetics. I just don't think there's any. That's not part of a conversation that I really am interested in. Yeah.
John, you have 1 minute.
1 minute. So we have one last question, and you had your hand up first.
With the stunning nature of finding out that there really is essentially a correct translation.
Yeah.
What I want to know about apologetics is about apologetics on this.
Yeah.
The various witnesses, you said that there were times when some of them did or didn't recant some
Yeah, so-
portion? I mean, is there anybody who talks about how James Strang painstakingly tried to make a new language just for this, or?
So I don't think that they. So there were lots of different people. Some of the witnesses left Strang and actually started their own Reformed Strangite Mormon church that Strang calls the Pseudos. And so then they have a big fight, just like Joseph Smith had with the Whitmers and things like that. And different other ones of them, I think, do recant, whatever, that they don't think that the Vorhee plates are real at a certain point. But it doesn't mean that that they have actual testimony, I think, that's any good, that where they saw him do it or something like that. There are people who are anti-Strangites who have said, well, Strang was just doing that or he made it up and things like that. But I don't know that we have the good.
But nobody really addresses what you've discovered here about it.
No, they don't know about this. And like I said, I would say, like, if the Farms guys had this to work with the with the golden plates, as opposed to just like kind of chiasmus and what's the thing in Saudi Arabia, Nahum.
Yeah.
If you had that only that weak broth, if you have something like this, the bistrophodon, all of this stuff, it's a lot more to work with, right? But anyway, so it's pretty interesting stuff.
So we're going to call time. So if you have another session to get to, that's great. John, if you want to stay.
No, I got to go in there.
Hei, dette Claudia i Mwelv i Norge. Did you know that infants on thrones in Norwegian are called spedbarn på troner? Du kan kommentere denne episoden på nettsiden infantsonthrones.com. Og hvis du liker det du hører, gi forumet 5 stjerner og skriv en kort anmeldelse på iTunes. Det har jeg gjort. For all you non-Norwegian speakers out there, you can comment on this episode on infantsonthrones.com. And if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating in iTunes. Det noen som vil avslutte med bønn?
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.